Hello gamers, it's Frigate time. Today is not just going to be a tier list, it's also going to be something of a guide. What do you do with frigates, and how do you use them? Where did they come from? Where did they go? And most importantly, are they related to Cotton Eye Joe? Basic rules for this tier list, I'm only going to be evaluating combat performance. It is a lot easier to make precise judgments when you don't have to worry about multiple different performance metrics. We're just looking at combat performance, so ships will not be penalized for things like high maintenance. The ships will be operating under AI control only. Also not going to be included freighters, for a very simple reason. A big part of their evaluation comes down to non-combat statistics. This is the skill set that I'm going to be using during a lot of the tests as I demonstrate some of the frigates in this video. All of them will be coming with sample builds, showing them in the simulator, so you can get a real feel for what I am showing you. Crew training, flux regulation, and phase coil tuning are the key skills here to take note of. Alright, starting things off, the dishonorable mention, the Lion's Guard Brawler. Now the baseline Brawler is not a particularly great ship. It has a lot of flaws. It has a lot of upsides, for sure, but it has a lot of flaws. And the Lion's Guard Brawler says, well, what if we take that ship and make it worse? With 2 medium mounts and 2 small universal mounts, the Brawler is already struggling a little bit with ordnance points. It doesn't quite have enough to do everything it wants to do. Compared to the baseline variant, this one has fewer ordnance points. On top of that, it has a low top speed. And now for frigates, there's 2 really important stats: top speed and flux capacity. This is very important. The first thing you're going to do with your frigates is capture battlefield objectives, and your enemy frigates are going to be doing the same thing. You want your frigates to win so that you can get those objectives and then deploy your full fleet. So, the Lion's Guard Brawler. 100 baseline top speed is pretty bad for a frigate. It tries to make up for this by using maneuvering jets as its system, and that is just not good enough. You are better off having a ship that already has a good top speed rather than relying on its system to compensate for poor top speed. Now the advantages that the Lion's Guard Brawler variant gets: energy bolt coherer. That is pretty worthless on frigates. It's a lot more useful on capital ships. That 100 gets multiplied by a nice targeting unit bonus, so that 100 becomes 160 extra range. That's nice. On a frigate, you're just never doing that. If you really try to lean into it, the result is a very mediocre ship. How unfortunate for you, Lion's Guard Brawler. Try again next time. Now, our other D-tier dishonorable mention is the Gremlin. Coming in at a whopping 6 points, this thing sucks. The Gremlin has no top speed. You basically need to put safety overrides on this thing, otherwise it simply cannot move. The result is that even though you only have 35 ordnance points, you really only have 20 because you have to get safety overrides. And then with only 20 left over, you need to get some capacitors because its baseline flux capacity is nothing. And then you're not really left with much for weapons. The best that I could come up with was slapping on an S-modded expanded missile racks and missile autoloader, throwing in a couple Reapers on the front, and then just hoping that it's going to shoot something important. A couple of light machine guns to give it some kind of anti-shield damage, but that's about the best you're going to do. It is a disposable weapon, and it does come with rugged construction, so you can use it as a disposable weapon without really hurting your wallet, but we're not really concerned about the wallet with this evaluation. We're concerned with how effective it is as a combat ship on its own. Now, the reason that it's D tier, not F tier, is because they're not unusable. But with the D tier, I really don't think there's any reason to use these over other ships. Basically, with both of these ships, there's something else that does what they do better. That is all I have to say about the Gremlin. But when we cut to C tier, a lot of these ships are very niche, but they do have unique roles that they fill, unlike the D tier ships, which are just worse versions of other ships. First off, the Lion's Guard Centurion. It is a little bit better than the Lion's Guard Brawler. Energy bolt coherer, once again, not doing a whole lot, especially considering that if you're going to use energy weapons, you kind of need to use the antimatter blaster. But if you're going to do that, then you need safety overrides to have enough speed to use it effectively. You can see with the sample build, gone with hardened shields and missile autoloader, trying to overload the enemy with a Sabo plus antimatter blaster, chip away at their shields more consistently with the IR pulse lasers, and hopefully get an antimatter blaster onto the armor to actually punch through. You can see a lot of the time with these capacitors, the bare minimum for any shielded ship is 4,000. For any shielded frigate, that's your bare minimum. You really do want more than that, but anything less than that is basically unviable. Alright, next up in C tier, we have the Vanguard. Now this might get bumped up to B tier in the future because right now it's 6 points to deploy. In the next patch, it's getting buffed to 4 points. I don't know if it's going to be quite B tier, maybe bottom of B tier, because right now the main problem with it is that it is a shieldless, phaseless ship. And for a frigate, that is just a bad strategy. It kind of makes up for this by just having a lot of stats. But the reality is that it's still a frigate, which means that in a head-on battle, its stats are going to pale in comparison to anything larger than itself. Now, other frigates make up for this by using hit-and-run tactics. The Vanguard, every time it does that, it is taking permanent damage, which means that it is on a short clock. During that lifespan, it can fight very effectively. It can get a lot of damage done. But it is on a lifespan, which means that longer fights are really not suited to it. This is why I favor harpoons, or basically really any missile with low ammo counts. Right? With a lot of the other frigates, you want something that has a bit more staying power. With the Vanguard, it's going to blow up before it actually uses up all of its ammo. And if it doesn't blow up, it's because you've retreated it from the battle. Light Needlers, as always, fantastic for getting burst damage through shields. You can see that the main things that you want to look for in its durability are reinforced bulkheads, armored weapon mounts, and automated repair unit. It does have some mining lasers in those side slots. It's better to have a little bit of token point defense than nothing at all, for AI purposes largely. Well, it's there to prevent the AI from just spamming missiles at you, because if you have no point defense, then the AI will just fire everything at you. So having mining lasers causes them to hesitate, even though the mining lasers wouldn't actually shoot anything down. If you have a small slot that's empty, it's almost always worth it to stick in a mining laser if you can afford it. And that's enough about the Vanguard. Now we've got the Lasher. This is a great little ship. It does have a bit of a problem though. Being a low-tech ship with low-tech shields and mediocre speed, it really can't do the skirmisher role as well as you would like. In fact, that seems to be the best way to use them, is don't even send them out as skirmishers at all. So let me take a moment to explain. Skirmishers versus escorts. Skirmishers are the frigates that you're using to capture the points, to 1v1 enemy frigates, and also to go and flank enemy capital ships. Basically, all three of that gets rolled under the same. Like, if you build a ship to do one of those things, it's going to do all of those things together. Escorts are just, you set them to escort one of your ships and protect it from getting flanked. Lashers, while they do have a lot of downsides due to their low-tech nature, thanks to accelerated ammo feeder, they do pretty good damage output despite being only 4 points. And for that reason, they make a pretty good escort. With its low speed and weak shields, it doesn't have the ability to actually get out of a bad situation if it's operating by itself. But when it's an escort, it can just hide behind its friendly capital ship, and that kind of solves that problem. Also notice the Gorgons, you're going to probably find that a lot of these missiles get used over and over again. It's mostly going to be Sabos or Gorgons. Those work really, really well in frigate 1v1s. Alright, now we are on to the Brawler, the baseline Brawler. This thing is a little bit better than the Lions Guard Brawler, but it's still not great. The complete lack of turret slots, it still doesn't have quite enough ordnance points for everything at once. Yeah, it's a bit of a struggle. This one takes advantage of the Heavy Needler plus Thumper, one of the rare cases where I think the Thumper is actually quite good. Basically, where the other one used Sabos to try and do burst damage to enemy shields, this one's using the Heavy Needler, and then the two Gorgons are more for anti-armor. They can't do anti-armor against larger ships, but they're good enough against other frigates. And then, of course, the Thumper just provides the ability to shred through hull once that happens. A lot of the same issues that I cited for the Lions Guard variant are still present here. It's just going to do a little bit better. Next up, we've got the Vigilance. This one is kind of in the same bucket as the Vanguard, although for a different reason. Where the Vanguard struggles to have any kind of longevity due to its lack of shields, the Vigilance struggles because of its lack of ammo. It is entirely reliant on that medium missile mount for it to do damage. It's got a medium hybrid mount and a medium missile mount. The medium hybrid by itself is just never going to be enough. It doesn't matter what you put there. So it has to rely on that medium missile. Coupled with fast missile racks, that can output a fair amount of damage until it runs out of ammo. And that's kind of the problem. It's here for a good time, not for a long time. Now, one of the cool things is that the SWAT penalty for expanded missile racks is that it slows the missile rate of fire. But for a ship with fast missile racks, this is really a non-issue, and so that penalty ends up being a non-factor. And you can safely spawn your expanded missile racks without really worrying about the downside. Now, when it comes to weapons, you're going to see a lot of patterns. Sabo plus Phase Lance is very, very effective on any frigate that can mount it. In fact, it might even be a good choice on the Lions Guard Brawler, just completely ignoring Energy Bolt Coherer. On the other hand, another common pattern is Light Needler plus Gorgons. And the end of C tier, we have the Pirate Wolf. Now, usually pirate variants are going to be in the same tier as their baseline model. Not just because, most of them are just a paint job, but even the variants that actually modify something, usually it reduces their ordnance points in exchange for reducing their deployment points, which is often a fair trade-off. The difference with the pirate variant of the Wolf is that not only does it do that, it also downgrades its ability. There is no other pirate variant that downgrades its ability. All of them keep the same ability as the baseline model, except for the Pirate Wolf, and that's why it's going to be lower on the tier list than the baseline Wolf. Once again, we've got Phase Lance and Sabos because that just works. It's going to need expanded missile racks because it is very reliant on those Sabos to get through shields. And by the way, a lot of these missiles, if it's running more than one missile, a lot of the time, running them linked. Right, you press W to go to your weapon groups, and then look for the green one, that's your missiles, and click it to switch it from alternating to linked. Most of the time, that's going to be the right call, so I would recommend doing that. This is another one of those ships that benefits immensely from S-modded extended shields. It can't get the full 360 degrees, but the baseline is so small that covering the sides is still a big improvement. And once again, it's got a token mining laser for token point defense. You can see that, as I said, 4,000 is the bare minimum flux capacity, and this ship is just barely able to get enough flux for its weapons and its shields. Just barely. Alright, now moving on to the B tier, right, where C tier are often unique in what they do, but flawed in some way. B tier are a lot more reliable. Starting with the Tritachyon variant of the Brawler. That's right, there's a Brawler variant for every tier. And what makes the Tritachyon Brawler variant so much better than the others? Mostly just the ordnance points. Where the Lion's Guard variant subtracts 3 ordnance points, this one gives you plus 10. Oh, and instead of maneuvering jets, you have plasma jets, which are a lot better. These things allow it to make short distance sprints. For when you're equipping a lot of burst damage weapons, can make all the difference in the world. And once again, we're going Phase Lance, Advanced Optics, Sabos. It is a very reliable strategy. This thing has so many ordnance points that it can actually afford S1 extended shields while doing everything else that it wants to do, which the other variants simply couldn't. Now we're on to the Wolf. Yeah, it's one step up from the Pirate Wolf. Now, compared to the Tritachyon Brawler, the Wolf is basically worse in almost every way. It's smaller shield arc, lower flux stats. It's only got 1 Phase Lance instead of 2. It's got a lot of downsides. The big upside is, first of all, it's got a higher baseline speed. It doesn't need plasma jets. It's already fast. And then on top of that, it gets Phase Skimmer, which is just one of the best abilities in the game, especially if you can get an officer with systems expertise. This thing is extremely nimble. It can get into and out of bad situations very, very easily. And the Sabo Phase Lance combo gives it the ability to do a decent amount of damage. Ideally, you'd want a frigate that does more damage, but for only 5 deployment points, this thing does good enough while being usually first to the capture points thanks to its Phase Skimmer. Next up, we've got the Luddic Path Gremlin. Now this thing is 2 tiers up from the regular Gremlin. It gets safety overrides for free. It's basically plus 15 ordnance points, which when you've only got 35, that's a lot. The result? Well, now we can afford some actual weapons. Throw in a light needler, throw in a light assault gun, give it some missile racks, give it some Gorgons. And while you're at it, you can S-mod something else. In this case, I chose auxiliary thrusters to give it a bit more of a agility. Right, the S-mod bonus only triggers when the zero flux boost is active, and with safety overrides, it's always active. Still not the best phase ship, but it's a lot better than what we had before. This thing is actually something I would consider using. Why would you use the Gremlin when you could use this? Moving on, we have the Luddic Path Lasher. Now, it doesn't move up as much as the Gremlin does with its free safety overrides, because it doesn't need them as badly. Getting plus 15 ordnance points when you have. It's the difference between like a 20% boost versus like a 50% boost, roughly speaking. So it's still a good improvement, but not quite as much. Once again, you're seeing the Light Needler Gorgon combo, and if you have the extra flux to spare, you're going to throw in a Light Assault Gun as well. Same S-mod as the baseline Lasher, because it's going to suffer from a lot of the same problems. But being faster, this one can act as more of a skirmisher. And now we've got the Centurion. You can see the pattern here. The Lion's Guard variants are one tier down from their baseline models, because this one can actually equip ballistic weapons. In fact, there's a lot of different things you can do with this one. You could do a similar thing where you run Safety of Rides with like an antimatter blaster, but you could also run machine guns, because you have access to ballistics. Or, something silly you can do is run all in on burst lasers and use it as an escort. In this case, I didn't do any of that. I just went with, once again, double Light Needler, Gorgon with a missile autoloader. And the result is a ship that works just fine. And that's how I describe the Centurion. It's just fine. And now we're into A tier. This is stuff that if you see it early on, just grab it. Just grab it, because it's going to be good. Starting with the Tempest. Now, the Tempest has the glory of being the fastest frigate in the game. So it basically has the luxury of being able to engage and disengage and use hit-and-run tactics even against other frigates. Couple that with the fact that it's got point defense in the form of its Terminator drones, which counteracts a common weakness of frigates, which is that vulnerability to fighters. And this thing is very, very versatile. Very, very reliable, which it has to be at 8 deployment points. S-mod extended shields and frontal shield conversion gets it a solid 360-degree arc. Now, just like the other frigates, you could do double phase lance with advanced optics. But the Tempest doesn't need to. It can, but it doesn't need to. Largely thanks to its termination sequence ability. That already gives it access to anti-armor. You're still going to want sabos, but you could afford to run something else like the heavy burst laser ion pulsar combo. This gives it access to EMP damage and some extra point defense even when the Terminator drones are destroyed, without sacrificing too much in terms of damage output. Next up, we've got the Scarab. There's a few ways to build this thing, but by far the funniest is to go all in on burst lasers, with expanded magazines and advanced optics. You wouldn't think of burst lasers as a primary weapon, but it can be. The Scarab is the perfect example of that. The unique way that time flow interacts with beams also increases their armor penetration. Beam armor penetration is based off of their damage per second, and when you increase the time flow, they're squeezing more damage per second into each second. The result is that you can go all in on burst lasers and they will just do the job, while at the same time keeping it safe from fighters and missiles. Next up, we've got the Hyperion. Yes, that's right, it's A tier. Remember, this is under AI control. It's 15 deployment points. It has to be worth 15 deployment points. Unfortunately, it is, but not so impressive that I would put it in S tier. I still think that a lot of the time you're probably going to want safety overrides. It can function without it for sure, but one of the big things with the Hyperion is that it already has high baseline flux stats, so putting your points into those, your ordnance points into its flux stats, doesn't really net a lot of returns. Instead, hull mods give you a lot more value. Like paying 3 for stabilized shields gets you 150 flux. That's 15 vents for 3 points. And it's a similar story with safety overrides. For 15 points, you get 550 flux dissipation. The returns are ridiculous. Even with delicate machinery, it's hard to pass up on that kind of value. Next up, we've got the Shade. Now this is a real phase ship, and it does what phase ship do. Best way to build your high-tech phase ships? Light Needler plus Antimatter Blaster. Give it a phase anchor, and then max out its capacitors. You want long recharge weapons that do burst damage, because they can unphase, fire their weapons, and then go back into phase, and they're not losing any DPS. Instead, you're increasing your DPS by speeding up their recharge. You're going to want hardened subsystems on these things. But then, once you've done that, you don't really need anything else. Which is why I've S-modded high-resolution sensors, because these things are great at leading the charge and capturing points on the enemy side of the field. So getting that S-mod bonus, giving them an increased vision radius, means that when they do that, they can also scout out the entire enemy fleet. But you don't need high-resolution sensors. You could S-mod anything else that you feel like. And next up, we've got the Monitor. Some people call this double S-tier super broken. And there's a good reason for that, which is that the Monitor is very unique. Thanks to its Flux Shunt hull mod, it's almost invincible. Fortress Shields reduces incoming damage by 90%, and its flux shunt allows it to dissipate hard flux while its shields are up. Unlike other frigates, this is the one where you actually want to max out dissipation instead of capacity due to flux shunt as a hull mod. The result is it's very hard to kill, and it can distract larger ships than itself. It can distract entire capital ships sometimes. But that's only if you're lucky. Sometimes it gets chased to the corner of the map by a single enemy frigate, and it doesn't really know what to do because it can't kill it. And that's one of the problems with the monitor, is it's a good crutch if your fleet is struggling. But if your fleet is not struggling, it doesn't really do anything, because it doesn't really have the damage to contribute in any meaningful way. Even the flak cannons are not going to shoot down a lot of fighters. In this case, I tried to have it contribute by giving it a couple salamanders and some ECCM package, which is okay. But at the end of the day, that's the real issue, is that it's passive. It's not actively disarming the enemy fleet, it's just distracting, which I put in A tier because it is a very solid crutch that you can lean on, but an ideal fleet would just never have a monitor because it's not contributing enough proactively. And finally, we have the Pirate Shade. Compared to the regular Shade, it has a lot less ordnance points, and the trade-off is that it costs less to deploy. But unlike with the Wolf and the Pirate Wolf, this thing has the same ability. It also has the EMP emitter. Right? It's not a degraded EMP emitter, it's this full-on ability. Now, due to the loss of ordnance points, you can't quite afford 2 Light Needlers, so in this case, I threw in a Salamander in that second slot. And you can't afford a lot of capacitors, so your second S-mod is probably going to have to be a Flux Coil adjunct to make up the difference. But the end result is still going to be pretty good. It's still going to perform pretty well. Not quite to the same level, but you're saving points. And if you need those points, then you can get a Shade that's just slightly worse, but save you a little bit of cost. And now we get to the S tier. These are ships that are just the best. No bias involved. First off, the Omen. You saw it coming. What makes it so good? Well, just like other frigates, it can beat enemy frigates in a 1v1 pretty easily. It's fast, so it can go capture the points. But on top of all of that, the Omen is a great support ship. Now, the EMP emitter is on the Shade as well, but the big difference with the Omen is that it's not a phase ship. Instead, it has a really good shield. Now, phase ships are great, but the problem with the Shade is that it can't really act as a support. If you try to have it support a friendly ship, then anytime it phases, its EMP emitter shuts off. The Omen doesn't have that problem, because it relies on shields instead. So not only does it provide the capability of capturing the points and 1v1ing enemy frigates, it can also protect your teammates with one of the few point defense weapons that actually fires over friendly ships. In fact, if you're running a lot of Omens in your fleet as your main frigate, like maybe you run 5 of them, you can send them out to capture the points at the start of the battle, and then as soon as you're done deploying everything, pull them back to act as escorts for your ships, and your other ships oftentimes don't really even need their own point defense, because the support from the Omens is good enough. So the thing about the Omen is that it doesn't do any one particular thing extremely well, but it's just extremely versatile. It manages to provide this extra level support to your other ships without sacrificing its combat capability, all in a package that's only 6 deployment points, and it gets a free ECM package because why not? Next up, the Afflictor. Where the Omen does a lot of things well, the Afflictor does one thing well. Does a lot of damage. Just like with the Shade, you're going Light Needlers and Antimatter Blasters with Phase Anchor, and you max out your capacitors. And that's all you've got to do. The big difference with the Afflictor is that it's more expensive, and in exchange, it gets an insane ability, Entropy Amplifier. If you put Entropy Amplifier on just a random support ship, it would be amazing. Just being able to click on the enemy and debuff them so they take extra damage, fantastic. But then on top of that, the Afflictor also is an extremely fast phase ship that can zip around the map at lightning speed, and also it can fire off a ton of burst damage with its weapons loadout. It is a killing machine, and even if it sits back doing nothing, as long as it's spamming its ability, it's still useful. It is impossible to put this in anything lower than S tier, even under AI control. Now, when you put it in player hands, it becomes one of the best ships in the game. Despite being only 12 deployment points, it can compete with a lot of capital ships in terms of its actual effectiveness on the battlefield. I mean, maybe that's pushing it a little bit far, but it definitely feels like it's up at like 30 deployment points of value in player hands, easily. Next up, we have the Luddic Path Brawler. It's another brawler. Now, why is this one so high? It's not just the safety overrides. It also trades out the useless maneuvering jets, because it doesn't need them now that it's got the extra speed from safety overrides, in exchange for the accelerated ammo feeder. So it's got a bunch of extra flux, safety overrides fixes the top speed issue, and then now it gets a new ability that boosts its damage output even further. I mean, this thing is a damage monster for only 6 deployment points. It's a very specialized ship, and it still has some weaknesses, but it's worth supporting because it brings a lot to the table. And that's even after it got nerfed from 5 to 6 deployment points, where every other brawler variant is 5, this one is 6. Still the same beast. And then finally, we have the pirate variant of the Flictor. Just like with the Shade, it is a slightly worse version of the same ship, but the key is that it keeps the ability. So if you really need something with entropy amplifier, but you can't quite afford the 12, maybe you can afford a 9. And that's kind of it. It is very straightforward. Yeah, so that's about it. See ya.